Sa'yo lamang naramdaman ang kapahingahan. Sa'yo lamang natagpuan ang kaginhawaan. Ikaw ang Diyos ng kalakasan sa aking kahinaan, Diyos ng kagalingan. Sa isang salita mo lang ako'y tatahan, Diyos na makapangyarihan. Sa isang haplos mo lang ako'y bubuti. Sa yakap mo naramdaman ang kapayapaan. Sa piling mo mananahan, magbabalik sa'yo. Ikaw ang Diyos ng kalakasan sa aking kahinaan, Diyos ng kagalingan. Sa isang salita lang ako'y tatahan, Diyos na makapangyarihan. Sa isang haplos mo lang ako'y bubuti. Diyos ng kagalingan. Sa isang salita mo lang ako'y tatahan, Diyos na makapangyarihan. Sa isang haplos mo lang, Diyos ng kagalingan. Sa isang salita mo lang ako'y tatahan, Diyos na makapangyarihan. Sa isang haplos mo lang ako'y bubuti. Ako'y bubuti.
Hi everyone, I am Architect Patch and you are watching Curve TV, your collaborative construction channel. Hello partners! Kamusta kayong lahat? I really hope everyone is safe and well. And while you're here at Curve TV, we will bring you the different sides and faces of the industry like never before. Fresh, inspiring, unintimidating. Join us for an hour of talk and more. Let's get ahead of the curve. Okay, so over the past decades, economic damages resulting from natural hazards have amounted to billions and trillions of pesos caused by geophysical hazards such as earthquakes and landslides, as well as hydrometeorological hazards, including typhoons and floods. Climate-related disasters in particular are increasing worldwide and expected to intensify with climate change. So much have happened these past few weeks. I know you are all aware of that. That's why dahil sa mga bagyong nagdaan, simulan na natin kay Quinta, all the way to Ulysses, ang dami nating napagdaan ng typhoons in the recent weeks. So today, we will talk about disaster risk management and the power of the design and build industry in building resilience to these reoccurring issues. Let's welcome our first guest, who has over 12 years of experience in the structural engineering field. He finished his master's degree in structural engineering from the University of the Philippines, Diliman, specializing in structures. He is currently the principal engineer of Zenith Structural Engineers, a structural consulting firm that caters structural analysis and design of buildings. Ladies and gentlemen, Engineer Earl P. Bonita. Good afternoon,
Hi,
Engineer.
Hi, Architect Patch. Good afternoon. It's good to be here in Bold Talks and to all those who are watching right now.
Nice to have you here, Engineer Earl. We're excited to have this discussion with you. And other than Engineer Earl, joining us also is a registered and licensed architect. He's a top-notcher, sixth to be exact, in the National Licensure Examination, a certified Verde professional, also knowledgeable with LEED, CASB, DGNB, and really a construction safety officer accredited by the Department of Labor and Employment. He is also a college instructor at St. Louis University and lecturer at JPT Review Center. Marami to, building legislations, professional practice, and history. And the current National Secretary, Committee on Bylaws of the UAP 2019 to 2020. And not yet done, a National Secretary of the UAP of the Philippines, Architect Levy Canaleta.
Oh, hi.
What an intro.
Just a correction, I'm not the National Secretary. I'm the Secretary of the National Committee on Information Technology.
Okay, thank you very much for correcting that.
Reading my curriculum vitae.
Oh, pwede na. Pwede
Gagawa
na
na ako ng introductory paragraph ko pala para ma-shorten siya. Anyway, thank you so much for having me here.
But nice to have you here, Architect Levy, together with Engineer Earl. And we also have another guest on our panel. We also have Engineer Egay Dapiton with 40 plus years experience in civil engineering and environmental engineering, including risk management. And he is also writing a book in risk engineering. Very relevant today. We will talk about that later on. Hi, Engineer Earl. Hi, Engineer Egay. Hi.
Hello, Architect Patch. And
Hi.
There, and to everyone.
I love your background, Engineer Egay. It looks very industrial and very ready for risk management discussion for today. Okay.
I like that one.
Oh, ganda eh, with the light eh. So as you can see, guys, we are joined by three gentlemen who will be here to answer your questions, and we'll be discussing about the different parameters on risk management, how we can help design our homes or structures, and how we can prevent all these happenings in the future. no? So let's start now with Engineer Earl muna. Engineer Earl, can you tell us a little bit more about your specialization and how you actually help doing this in terms of risk management?
Well, actually, my specialization is doing buildings. So when we design buildings, we usually refer to our code, the National Structural Code of the Philippines. So to ensure that the building is sound with respect to the concrete and the rebar and all the reinforcement that's being used during construction, we see to it that we follow the code provisions. So by doing that, our role is to design with the correct parameters when it comes to earthquake. So we are going to refer our parameters from the study of the soil, from the site specific, or from the code itself. So when it comes to typhoon or high winds, so we also have some parameters from the code as well as from wind tunnel analysis or any study pertaining to the wind affecting the building or houses.
And with the recent typhoons, Engineer Earl, medyo gamit na gamit yung mga codes na ginawa ninyo.
Yes, actually, gamit na gamit siya. And for some time, the code changes. It may adapt to the new trends and new values for the typhoon, how many kilometers per hour, or what's the wind speed. So it is a continuous updates in terms of the forces that's being designed as part of the parameters for wind design for that matter.
Right, kasi currently nagde-develop yan kasi I know there are some instances before na kailangan talaga i-update yung codes because palakas ng palakas yung hangin. 'Di ba? Dati meron tayong maximum and then recently we've been having typhoons reaching 300 plus kilometers per hour pagdating sa maximum wind, no? Na kailangan talaga i-update yung codes natin.
Yes, correct. Yes.
Right. So what about, we have here Architect Levy. Architect Levy, kayo naman. What is your specialization and how do you use this pagdating naman sa risk disaster management?
Again, thank you so much for having me here. And tama ka pala kanina, no? Sabi mo nga kanina na lumalakas na yung intensities ng mga bagyo natin, ng to be specific, ng mga bagyo. Sabi mo kanina, 300 plus Yolanda, that's 315 kilometers per hour. Anyway, for my case naman, I have just graduated from the Ateneo with a degree in Master in Disaster Risk and Resilience. And through that, I am currently integrating resilience in my sustainability practices because I believe that resilience is a precondition for sustainability. And I'd like to promote that one, no? Yung pag-integrate ng resilience concepts kasi more often than not, architects are geared towards the integration of sustainability alone with outright disregard to some extent, no, for the resilience concept. So sana ma-highlight natin, no, through these through platforms like this yung importance ng pag-integrate ng concepts na, and I have started to work on that whenever I am invited to do talks on resilience and sustainability. I make it a point to highlight the importance of that concept. And in my projects as well, whenever I conduct this first meeting with clients, I always impart to them the knowledge on the integration of the matters. Thank you.
Right. And as far as architecture is concerned and designing of not just houses, but any buildings in general, we also do some progress, diba? Like compared to before, nag-evolve na talaga yung design natin. And I mean, when it comes to water level, yan ang isa eh. Pag flooding kasi wala ka rin din sa magawa eh. There are certain places in the Philippines na accepted na talagang magbabaha dyan kapag umulan ng malakas. So ngayon, as architects, the design process, you're thinking into building these structures, considered na yon, right? Am I right?
Tama. Yes, Architect Patch.
And together with Architect Levy, we have naman Engineer Egay, who is an environmental engineer, also a civil engineer, na gumagawa rin siya ng book. So, Engineer Egay, could you tell us a little bit more about this, your specialization, and how you are able to apply this with everything that's been happening to us now?
Okay. Usually, myself, they call me a risk engineer. Actually, I do risk management. I'm usually the admin that integrates structural engineering. A perfect environment. When you guys talk about how the structure looks, architects will provide you the different shapes. The structural engineer builds those shapes, and I tell them if those things will fail or not. That's what I'm almost like the what do you call this? A critic, not really a critic, but one who should be in between them. When the architect builds something, when Architect Levy talks about resilience, sustainability, etc., risk engineering should be there already. When the structural engineer starts to build, starts to design, starts to do the modeling, etc., the risk engineering should also be there. When they start to actually build these things together, for whatever purpose it is, risk engineering is also there. Ang problema natin dito sa Pilipinas, risk engineering is not part of whatever we build.
Right.
Napupunta kami do sa second part, which is forensic engineering. They call us after the fact.
Yes, unfortunately.
Sa abroad, common madali.
Which is, Engineer Egay, lalo na ngayon, nakikita na natin yung ripples, yung effect niyan, kung bakit na ever since, dapat talaga, the risk management is already involved during the planning stage pa lang. Right? And now, yun nga, nagiging forensic investigators na lang kayo kasi lalapit na sa inyo, paano na to? Lumubog na yung bahay. Paano na to? Hindi na makabangon yung community namin. Well, in fact, it could have been prevented when you were already there during the planning stage, right?
Well, hopefully that's the perfect thought. The heavy engineering in that. I mean, risk assessment, the analysis, and then the provision of an actual solution integrating structural and architecture. Dapat talagang they meld together. Hindi pa nakikita yung perfect na timpla eh. Ang nangyayari nga, we are told in the local scenery, even in abroad, in the scenery of engineering and construction, natatawag na kami pagka meron na nangyari. Kasi pinaimbestigahan fail to. Mali ba yung structural engineer? Teka, tama ba yung design ni yung wind tunnel simulation ng architect? Bakit nakapilipik yung Bakit nung bumagsak yung Twin Tower hindi pa ganon? Diba? Bakit pa ganon? I mean,
right.
That's starting work for us, but at the same time, we're thinking, pwede mo prevent it. I mean, accidents, they're called accidents because they are preventable. They are called risk because there is a possibility that you can solve it. There is a possibility that it may or may not happen.
Yes.
However, that level of uncertainty is actually the one that feeds structural engineers and architecture in melding these kind of designs.
Yes, I agree. And with Engineer Earl and Architect Levy, kasi kayo yung kayo rin yung pinaka-skeleton ng mga buildings. We have the structural engineer here and the architect. So this is a very good collaboration, this group actually. Now my question is for Engineer Earl and Architect Levy, during the planning stage, say any structure, yung pagkawala ba ng risk management engineers, is it from the client's end, from our end? Kanino ba tayo nagkukulang? Were you able to work with anybody na ganon in your previous projects? Was it ever considered? Anybody?
Yes, from Yes, from my experience, basically, kung ano yung nakagisnan eh. So maybe from other countries, they have been considering that risk mitigation, risk management. So, but looking forward, it helps if we can implement that one because those studies, forensic studies, and risk management can now be a tool to help address the succeeding buildings that is or that are about to be built in the future. So the adjustments and all the learnings that we can learn from those previous disasters and risk management approach can be applied prior to the disaster itself.
Mhm.
Right.
In my case naman, architect Patch, when I was working with the big firms, no, with the big architectural firms, andun si risk engineering, si risk management, because they have, or the developers, not to be specific, have the money, for the lack of a better term, to get those kinds of services. Now, ngayon as a freelance architect, um, alam ko ando naman si risk engineering, hindi lang ganun ka-formal. So to the architect listeners right now, more often than not, pinapractice nyo na po ang risk engineering because the basic concepts are definitely integrated in our practice, in the curriculum. It started in our schools, diba? In the apprenticeship and through to the practicing of the profession. Andyan lang yan. Now, we just need to, I think it's just high time that we need to put the concepts out there for us to appreciate and for the public to understand. That we need to translate them into the language na maiintindihan talaga ng publiko. And now, again, we have here Engineer Egay para bigyan tayo ng konting kaalaman. Of course, the time is not enough today, no, to for him to discuss the nitty gritty of risk engineering. So there, I believe we are on the right track. We are there. I know malayo pa, pero I believe as professionals, pinapractice naman na natin siya to some extent and to varying extents.
Just to follow dun sa sinabi mo, Architect Levy mo, tama eh. Para siya kasing nagiging add-on. It's like an add-on service for the developer side or
Kapag
client
pupulin mo yung formal,
natawa si,
ano, no?
si Engineer Egay kanina nung sinabi mo yun eh. Kasi talagang parang added service siya eh. Like, it's not at when you talk about minimum requirements, just to pass your permits, para mapasa yung building, okay na eh. Pero yung risk management, I think it becomes an add-on lang. Tama ba ako doon, Engineer Egay?
Yeah, that's actually that's the exact word there. It becomes like an add-on instead of being actually a part of. From the beginning itself, from the concept. Look, from the conceptualization of the project itself, down to the drawings, the design of the architects, and then to the structural engineering, through structural engineers. Risk engineering should already be part of that. Now, tama silang dalawa na pinapractice. Ang problema lang dito is yung practice is the basic Ang napuna ko lang sa construction industry. Yung tinatawag kong risk engineering, tinatawag naming risk engineering, ang equivalent na sinasabi doon is safety. Nung araw, ang tawag lang dyan is safety engineering. No, mayroon munang safety, tapos in-expand nila, naging safety engineering. And then because of so many large losses all over the world, including the disasters that are happening, and by the way, ladies and gentlemen, yung disaster, tayo ang nangunguna sa buong mundo because we are in a very precarious location.
Yes.
Pagka titignan niyo yung disaster map of the world, hindi niyo makikita ang Pilipinas kasi natatabunan tayo ng typhoon, ng earthquake, volcanoes, etc. I mean, you name it, the Philippines has it. So, dapat expert na tayo dito.
Mm-hmm.
Pero bakit hindi? Sabi nga ni Architect Levy, mahal ba? Kasi yung pagkakasabi ni Architect Levy na because the developers have the money para tuloy lumalabas ng risk engineering mahal. Hindi po. These are jokes from my friend also, no? From my friend. Pero yeah, we in fact, going back to the late 70s and the 80s, meron na pinapractice niyo yun. Tawag lang namin doon safety. So ang tawag sa akin nung inspector ako, safety engineer din yan. But we evolve. We evolve because the times demand an evolution of what safety is, and then integrate this in the design of the structure itself, and then on the outlook of the structure, and the difficult structural components that our structural engineers will design. So laging merong function, and then merong purpose lagi. There is a function, and then there is this duty ability. So yun yung ginagawa nilang dalawa. So yung risk engineering doon, nandun lagi yun. Nandun. Pero ngayon dapat natututo na tayo.
Engineer Egay, kasi I'm kind of sure yung mga nanonood ngayon, no, usually familiar kasi sila pagdating sa engineering, nandiyan yung structural, we have mechanical, yung MEPs, no? But when it comes to risk management engineering, I'm sure hindi familiar lahat dyan, that there is something na nag-exist yon. So for those, is that a specialization? Like, how do you take that in college? Do you have to be an engineer first before you can take that? Or pwede ka nang dumiretso doon? Can you inform them on how that begins?
Well, there is no formal schooling in risk engineering, but there are now formal courses in risk management. However, these formal courses in risk management is more geared toward finance.
Yes.
Financial. Anong kinalaman ngayon ng engineering doon? Again, the engineering part of the solution becomes an add-on. Ang unang iniisip is, paano yung losses namin dito? O may loss ba kami o hindi?
That's what I was referring to. Sorry, singit ko lang kanina.
So we now have to change gears, and then redirect the thinking of people, of these investors regarding having risk engineering or risk management properly integrated into the project itself. So, alam niyo ba na ang mga malalaking proponents ng mga projects, bakit utang yan? Ngayon, mga matatalino na sila, naghahanap sila ngayon ng risk management. Again, ang ibinibigay na risk management is more on the finance. Paano ang pinag-uusapan natin are dams? Like for example, developments, relocation of people.
Right.
Alam niyo sumasama ang loob natin lahat tayo, di ba? Ang laki-laki ng perang ginagamit, i-relocate yung mga tao sa kung saan lugar. Pagkatapos yung lugar pala na yon, kung hindi merong binabaha, merong nagla-landslide, etc. Now, there was a project that was referred to me, but we did not go through with it because of a lot of difficulties. Not in terms of the engineering itself, but because of other, political issues, etc. Yung nadi-design inipat mo yung mga tao doon sa may gilid ng bundok. So anong dapat na gagawin? Si structural engineer, alam niya. Si architect, alam niya yung gagawin doon sa mga bahay. Pero you are in a position, you are in a place where the risk itself is not actually a risk but becomes a problem. Ang risk merong uncertainty. Pag yung mo nababahain ka, magla-landslide ka, hindi risk yun. Problema yun. But management is also supposed to be there in doing that.
Right.
So, laki-laking pera na inaano natin, tapos sinasabi natin, ako, babahain na. Talaga naman kayong babahain eh.
Totoo yan. I agree with that, engineer. Kasi yung mga, it's sad, no, to see everything that happened, yung mga talagang binaha. But there are places talaga na talagang alam na natin na bahain kasi sila eh. Diba? Flood prone, if I may say that already. And we're very familiar with that. So, tama ka doon na nire-relocate nila ngayon yung mga tao in a place na alam naman na when disaster strikes again, sila ulit yung tatamaan. So, eto na naman tayo, the cycle begins, rescue operation will happen, money will be put out, volunteers will happen, na dapat sa umpisa pa lang, we can prevent this already. So now, just to keep the conversation going, we start with the urban planning. Diba? Yun eh, mga paglipat sa bundok and everything. we have a big problem when it comes to urban planning now because we have seen studies wherein pumapasok na dyan yung mga environmental issues na let's talk about the Sierra Madre. For example, I'm sure you've read about this na with the amount of rainfall that happened, Sierra Madre was supposed to be one of the, kumbaga, frontliners sa pag-prevent sa atin. And because of the lack of trees already and, you know, everything that's going on, nakakalbo. So ngayon, water really runs down and goes all the way to the dams. That leads to the next problem na talagang ang naging tawag nga natin dam you. Dam you talaga kasi it was about the dams, right? Overflowing, bukasan ng channel. We've seen that in Cagayan, in Tuguegarao. Your thoughts on these issues, engineers and architects. Ano pa bang pwede natin gawin? Kasi nandito na tayo eh. This is already our country. And we're experiencing this already. When it comes to urban planning, how can we protect ourselves from this? May ba natin i-prevent yung mga nangyayaring to? Let's start with with Engineer Earl.
Yeah, actually, based on my experience, it's all about anticipation. With regards to earthquake, for example, so we have to anticipate those areas that are prone to earthquake and those areas that, for example, the soil composition may tend to liquefy for that matter. So we need to anticipate those areas and some locations that are prone to these disasters. And then some of the programs possibly we can address by updating some guidelines in the code provisions, not only with the risk management aspect, but also to implement this solution part by part gradually to let more people be aware of this approach.
Tama. With the codes pa rin yun, di ba, sir? What about Architect Levy?
Okay.
In terms
Before
of
anything
urban
else,
planning.
I'd like to agree on what Engineer Egay discussed kanina. No, tama talaga yun. Dapat integrated na. But then again, we have started naman na to adopt that kind of thinking in our schools, in the apprenticeship, and in the practice. Pero ganun nga, just to reiterate, I'm thinking kasi pag sinasabing risk engineers no, in the context of the Philippine setting, it's primarily linked to the financial resources on the about the project, and that's not supposed to be the case. I think we have to define what risk is first. Ang risk po in Filipino no ay ano nga ba? Panganib. There we go. At marami tayong risks, okay? And ano ang hazards, okay? Siya ang yan yung isa sa mga contributing factors no for these risks in the Philippine setting. Unfortunately, marami tayong hazards. Okay, tama nga si Engineer Egay, we are the number 1 in the world. Now, so yun, kailangan ma-define muna natin siya what is risk, what is disaster, what is hazard, and so on and so forth. So again, we're on the right track. I'd like to believe that. Now, with regard to your question, that's a very good question. Alam naman na natin, andyan na ang mga communities. So what do we do? Then it would be a gargantuan task to have them relocated elsewhere. So intervention measures na lang po ang kailangan. The first thing that but whatever the measures are, I'd like to believe na kailangan participatory ang approach natin. It has to be started, well, all measures rather have to be started from the bottom up upwards. Okay, several studies have pointed to the importance of that kind of approach. Dapat makuha ang loob ng mga constituents and nothing else. That's the first important thing to consider. Dapat holistic as well. That's the second important thing that follows. Pero it doesn't happen overnight. Now, these are the immediate needs, no? Number 1, we have to be emotionally resilient. Okay, resilience. Or resilient adjective. We've been claiming as Filipinos we are resilient, but that's just one phase of resilience, okay? Which specifically refers to the emotional resilience in the bigger scheme of things. But yung totoong definition ng resilience, hindi pa tayo pwedeng ma-describe as is very resilient, no, in the ideal sense of the word. Ang dami niyang factors, no, nakaakibat, kumbaga. Again, we are emotionally resilient kasi dati pa tayo binobombard nitong mga hazards which convert themselves into disaster. So anyway, going back, yun yung immediate needs natin. We have to be emotionally resilient, and as Filipinos, I believe we are on the right track because we've been so emotionally resilient since day one, since time immemorial, because of these hazards and disasters. So may go bag ka dapat for your family members and for you as well. Okay, household level. Okay, yan yung pinaka importante for the moment. Evacuation plan. Okay, and what have you. But all of these immediate measures have to consider all types of hazards. Flooding lang po ang hina-highlight natin for the first part of this discussion, but we have several types of hazards in the country. May geological, may hydrometeorological, may biological, we have this COVID-19 pandemic, may environmental, may chemical pollution, technological, for example, nuclear radiation, wala tayo niyan, but we have dam failures, okay? Hazard din po yan, toxic waste and what have you. So all these hazards come into play when we talk about preparation. Hindi lang tayo magfo-focus sa isa. As you can see, nakafocus po tayo sa COVID-19 sa COVID-19 pandemic before all these typhoons came to existence, so to speak. Pero parang nataranta tayo, hindi ba tayo natuto, just borrowing the words of Engineer Egay. Bakit ganito pa ulit-ulit? Kasi nga we're just emotionally resilient and we're not that resilient in the bigger scheme of things, okay? Number two, for example, kulang tayo sa structural resilience, and that's another point to consider. But anyway, going back, immediate needs muna tayo, emotional resilience, preparation at the household level. Okay, number two, make your house structurally resilient. Yun yung second immediate needs, okay, in our communities right now. Pero again, in the context of the different hazards that are available here in the country, here in Metro Manila alone, ang dami. We have the West Valley Fault. Okay, that one needs to be considered as well. But of course, yun lang muna yung i-discuss kong immediate needs. But of course, among other things, so marami pa yan. But of course, ang ideal way to go is to take the is to think of long-term solutions. No, we need to assess. We need to understand the hazards, okay, the exposure or the exposed, tangible and intangible items, buhay, memories, and what have you, and the vulnerability, and then the capacity. Okay, those four: hazard, exposure, vulnerability, and capacity form part of the mathematical formula to calculate for the level of resilience or the level of risk in a community. So we need to understand those items and then work from there. And then last thing, we have to be sustainable. Okay, that's the third and last thing that I'd like to point out here on the ways to move forward. We have but of course we need to be resilient, because again, I believe that resilience is a precondition for sustainability. Why? Because sustainability is defined as the ability to provide for the current needs without compromising the provision for the needs of the future generation, diba? But if you are not resilient, okay, or if your house or structure is not structurally resilient, nasira siya ng isang disaster, then that structure no longer, okay, is no longer able to provide the needs for the current. So tanggal na yung isang component ng sustainability. Okay, so kaya siya precondition. Now, we have the good thing here is we have a lot of sustainable architectural elements or entities which inherently or unknowingly promote resilience. For example, let me give you an example. Solar, yung mga simpleng solar panels natin, to most architects, no, sabihin nila that's a sustainable entity that we can integrate in our building. But unknowingly, it's also something that increases, okay, the level of resilience of a structure. How? If your electricity connection to Meralco, for example, is cut off, you have a backup, kumbaga, and that makes you resilient. Yung rainwater collecting tank mo, okay, or system, for that matter, that's a sustainable thing to integrate into your building. But again, when a disaster strikes and your water supply from Maynilad or Manila Water gets cut off, you have a backup. And that makes you resilient as well. So we have to think of ways on how we can leverage or optimize the use of the sustainability tools, no, that we have been integrating since then. We just need to leverage them or optimize them rather, okay, para mas maangat pa natin yung level of resilience ng isang household. So there you go. Thank you.
That's right. Architect Levy, no, on so many levels, like for example, yung designing sustainable houses and structures. We're already starting with that, no, and people are becoming more conscious on ways on how they can, save money or help them out in the future. For that, yun nga, yung rainwater collection and the solar panels, no, which is a good tip for everyone. Na yun nga, kapag prone tayo na mawala ng kuryente kapag may typhoon kasi they have to cut it off. And with the backup of the solar panels, you can have your electricity, right? But you've mentioned so many times the word resilience. And I think that's right. The Filipinos are resilient already to typhoons. But hanggang kailan ba tayo magiging ganon? So my question to Engineer Egay now is, for you, sir, like, what are some examples of the community resilience projects that has gone wrong? Hindi nag-work. Yung they tried to do it pero hindi lang siya gumana. You don't have to name any particular project, no? Pero mga napansin niyo lang, what went wrong dun sa mga attempt to actually do resilient projects?
Alam mo, malinaw yung sinabi nilang dalawa. No? They mentioned two things, but I will add another one. One, like what Architect Levy said, one of the most prevalent problems that we have now is urbanization. 2 weeks ago, before the typhoon, my wife and I, we drove from Quezon City going to Quezon Sana. So we followed the new highway, and we were really, we had to stop in awe because, my goodness, they really cut the mountains, the hillsides, and then we now have a lot of communities around. The questions that I have been asked many years ago and repeatedly is, bakit ginagawa nila yung mga communities malapit sa highway? Pwede namang hindi. So urbanization is one problem. The other problem na looking at what just happened to us and what has been happening to us would be, one is those mining concessions. The other one is logging concessions. Yan ang mga problema natin dito eh. The others are just icing on the cake in terms of the risk assessment. So yung ibig sabihin nito, using the word of Architect Levy, we have a holistic approach in the design of a resilient community. Isipin mo na lang, yung mga taong inilipat, nawala dun sa mga squatters area. Ang ginawa nila, inilipat nila doon sa mga basurahan. Ano yung ibig sabihin ng basurahan? Doon, nilipat nila doon sa tundo. No, nilevel nila yung Rocky Mountain, yung anong tawag doon?
Smoky Mountain.
Okay.
Doon. Naisip din nila yung the other environmental problems na pwedeng magano doon. Meron pa yung ililipat because may gagawin na bagong highway sa certain part of Mindanao that goes directly to the airport. So may mga tao na ma-relocate. Sa nila nire-relocate doon sa may mga hillsides. Pero maganda yun. Challenge yun sa architect at sa mga structural engineer.
Pwedeng mag-singit lang real quick.
Go ahead, sir.
Ang ganda ng diniscuss ni Engineer Egay, no? But I believe the problem lies in the implementation. As a country, isa po tayo sa sa mga bansa na may pinakamagandang regulations on disaster. Trust me, on disaster resilience. Ang gaganda ng mga batas natin. Unfortunately, they are not they're not implemented very well. Pero ang gaganda po ng mga batas natin on disaster resilience. Now, the problem lies in the implementation. And I think that's the first thing that we have to do. We have to strictly follow and implement our local and national regulations. Of course, we have the building code and so on and so forth. Okay? But that only concerns your home. Yung five major legislations natin, PD 96, RA 9514, BP 220, PD 957, and BP 344, that only concerns your home. Okay? We have regulations which delineate guidelines on the layout of communities. Okay? For example, we have this offshoot of the 1999 Cherry Hills tragedy. We have the DNR DAO 2000-28. Okay, that's an offshoot of that Cherry Hills tragedy, if you can still recall that event. No, again, that's an offshoot. After that incident, we crafted this regulation which demands, okay, the crafting of EGA, Engineering, Geological, and Geohazard Assessment Report, or EGAR. Okay, in addition to the environmental impact assessment before you can secure the environmental compliance certificate for your subdivisions and other big projects. Okay, maganda yan. Okay, now everything has been laid out. Okay, in the context of how that legislation was crafted. Maganda yung legislation. Now, but may mga nakakalusot. Okay. And then another example. So dun palang safe ka na eh. These legislations that we have, so long as you follow them and you go beyond by adding a safety factor, I guess safe ka na. So for example, yung PD 96, we have this section 708 for group A dwellings, R1 to R3. Okay, floor live load dapat daw 200 kilograms per square meter. Sa ground floor, sa second floor, 150 kilograms per square meter yung calculation. Sa roof, okay, dapat ang wind load, no, I calculated at 120 kilograms per square meter. So okay na yan, I guess. But I believe tama rin yung sinabi ni Engineer Earl kanina. These legislations, though magaganda na sila, okay, have to be revisited from time to time because, simply put, climate change. Okay, and unfortunately, tayo yung nasa laylayan. No, we're not that industrialized yet, and as we all know, these industrialized nations are the primary culprits of climate change, based from several studies. So unfortunately, tayo yung naiipit. Pero of course, may contributions din tayo dito sa climate change. So there you go. It all boils down to the implementation of the legislations, and of course, to their revisions.
And taking off from that, no, kasi I guess kaya rin maganda na yung mga guidelines natin and regulations is because we already accepted the fact that all these calamities, all these disasters will really hit us because of our strategic location geologically, no? So world. So tama kayo, it is on the implementation lang. And nako, sobrang ganda nitong usapan natin. I will take a break. We will take a break for a while para medyo tubig muna kasi maganda ang discussion natin sa macro. After this, we are going to be answering some of the questions that we got from Facebook and Kumu. And we have here our three very well-informed panel who can answer that. We have different questions regarding structural resilience ng mga bahay nila, and all these more insights on disaster risk management coming up when Bold Talks return. Stay tuned, guys.
Panasonic. Panasonic.
Still watching Bold Talks, co-presented by Panasonic here at Curve TV, your collaborative construction channel. And we're still here with Engineer Egay, Engineer Earl, and Architect Levy, who will be answering some of your questions regarding risk management, how you can, protect or prevent your houses or structures with all the calamities that has been happening. And guys, I have some questions here. I will just read it. Anybody can answer this, no? We have one question from Ray Dukay. He's actually my professor at high school. Hi, sir. Nice to hear from you again. His question goes, what do they have to say about container houses? Aside from cost, what about adherence to building requirements and resilience to typhoons and floods? Would you recommend the proliferation of these? It's an open discussion. Anybody can answer. Engineer Earl, you can go.
So basically these container structures are considered light structures. So they are lighter than the usual reinforced concrete or steel structure. So basically, to make this type of structure resilient to any lateral forces like typhoon, high wind, sustained wind, gust of wind, or earthquake. So to address this concern of tilting or toppling over, so it has to be anchored well. So if this has to be put on top of each other, so it has to be anchored from the one container onto the top and then to the base. Like for example, a good connection to the foundation, to the pedestal, and proper anchoring will address the concern of risk when it comes to earthquake and typhoon for this type of light structure.
And because I've also studied container vans before, basically for my thesis, no? And ang claim kasi nila is container vans, yung structure niyan, sir, is matibay talaga because of the four corners.
Yes. So by itself, it's matibay na kasi nakita natin doon sa ship, saka naka-ano na siya, naka-stack on each other. So yung weak point na lang niya or yung weakness niya is kapag inassemble na siya into row houses or anything that is na pwedeng tirhan, is yung connection niya ngayon. Pagkapatong mo ng ganyan, paano mo siya i-connect dun sa four corners and on the sides and then down to the anchoring of the base para hindi siya mag-tilt during ground shaking o earthquake. So I think yun yung unang i-address. Doon naman sa lindol, medyo less likely yung force niya kasi mas lightweight siya compared sa reinforced concrete na massive yung buhos ng konkreto at saka yung bakal. So common denominator is the connection for the containers itself and the anchoring to the foundation kung saan siya naka-anchor either sa pedestal or sa raft or mat foundation per se.
So, engineer, for the viewers' information also, so we have the stackable container vans already, no? Or shells. Pagdating sa base niyan, do we use conventional foundation for that? Kasi syempre, kahit gaano katibay yung kapit ng isa't isa ng container van, kung hindi matibay yung foundation yan sa baba, kahit anong hangin pa, tatangayin talaga yan. So what do we use usually for the base for the container van?
For economical base siguro, we can use concrete, reinforced concrete base. And then siguro may predefined depth lang siguro from the ground para naka-embed siya, para may proper anchoring, para hindi siya, para to minimize uplift kapag mayroong lateral forces like typhoon or wind. And then those are cheap materials and very common in our industry. Reinforced concrete mat or raft type foundation.
So it
and then
go ahead, sir.
Yes, go ahead. Yeah.
No, go ahead.
And then also we have to check that also if the soil is quite soft or hard because at some times mayroong mga liquefiable layer. So minsan yung mga soil natin is nagsisettle. So it may cause some tilting. So that has to be addressed with soils report naman. So makikita naman doon kung mayroong soft soil or liquefiable during earthquake event naman. So ma-address siya not only sa uplift but also doon sa tilting or settlement ng foundation. So,
to
dual check,
recap on
kumbaga.
that, engineer, is dapat matibay talaga yung foundation. It all starts kung saan nakakapit yung container shell, which is yung base mo. And then that can help it pagdating sa mga strong winds, no? Siguro the other concern of people is pag nag-flood naman, yung rust,
Sorry,
yung kalawang.
Architect
Yes,
Patch,
go
pwede
ahead.
ako sumingit real quick lang.
Sure.
I
Go
think
ahead.
prior to the attachment no, to the foundation, I think we have to talk about yung sinabi ni Engineer Earl, yung location. I think that's the most important thing to consider. Dapat it's not located in a hazardous area. And that can be verified by the hazard maps that we have in the local level. Sa LGUs natin, meron po tayo niyan. And of course, we have the hazard maps that we can get from the Mines and Geosciences Bureau. So I think that's the most important thing to consider before we can work out on anything else, yung location. That's why we have EGAR that's added to EIA before we can start on something else.
Right. Yes, Engineer Agay.
Yeah, that's why you have to call a risk engineer. Because
Yes, there we go.
you know, because
Please
all
put your number below.
of you will be tied together by risk engineering. I mean, madali design ng structures that are, architecturally beautiful.
Mm,
And
I
sometimes
agree.
architecturally impossible for structural engineers. And yet, structural engineers has the capability to actually design this. Ang problema doon, katinay up mo na yan, yun nga, baka mamaya ako sana naman pinaglalalagay yun.
Mm,
You have to call the risk engineering.
Mhm.
You have to call a risk management practitioner who will actually tie these things together and tell everyone else, teka muna, meron tayong kulang dyan. Or maaaring sumobra ka. That's why yung tanong kanina is that's risk engineering as a profession. Kailangan ba engineer ka o hindi? Medyo mahirap sagutin yon. The book is entitled Risk to
Nice.
make everything easy for everyone to understand. But still there has to be a level of competence in terms of understanding kung ano yung pinag-uusapan natin. Kaya yung sinasabi kanina, define muna, totoo yun. Kasi my students do an experiment and we interviewed people.
Pinag-usapan namin yun ngayon.
Ano po na-interview tungkol sa risk? Alam niyo bang lahat merong sagot? Merong sagot lahat. At saka pag tinignan mong gano'n, teka, yung mga tao pala naintindihan nila kung anong risk eh. Pero
Alam nila, aware sila. Yun lang, anong ginagawa natin about it?
Ako, tinanong ng mga estudyante ko, Kuya, ano bang naintindihan mo pag tungkol sa risk? Siyempre, English o Tinagalog. Yung ano ba yung mga bagay na delikado o yung dangerous, yung mga gano'n. Alam mo, marami sila, may mga sagot sila. Iniipon namin halos naubos yung 3 oras namin sa pag-analyze pa lang ng sagot nila. Doon pa lang yun sa sa community pa lang ng school. So, hindi ba naintindihan ng tao? Naintindihan nila yun. That's why you have your structural engineers. We have among one of the best structural engineers in the world. And I can assure you that. Dahil marami na akong inikutan pati sa Europe, although mas matindi ang requirements ng Europe, pero kayang-kaya i-design ng mga Pilipino yun.
Mhm.
Ginaya ba
We have
natin?
Engineer Earl.
Ginaya ba natin yung Japan pag dahil nagpapadala tayo ng mga structural engineers sa Japan para mag-aral doon because of their exposure. Yung iba sa California. Ganun din naman tayo dito sa Pilipinas. Marami mga Pilipino engineers nandun sila nagdi-design noon.
I have to
Yes.
agree
And-
with that.
and to add- yes,
Go ahead,
yes.
Engineer Earl. Go ahead.
Yes, and to add into that, there's this thing now called risk-based engineering. So actually, not only when it comes to performance of the building, this risk-based design pertaining to kasi pag nagpapa-appraise ka ng building, like
Yes.
what I said, I will connect to the previous discussion kanina when it comes to financials, appraisal of your building, kung saan ba yung location, kung risky ba yan or hindi. Kasi yung appraisal mo is medyo mababa. Kung maganda yung pagka-design ng structure but the location itself is not so safe, so yung appraisal is medyo mababa siya. So it all boils down to the budget, the cost, and the finances of that particular establishment, for example. Tapos ngayon, mayroon na tayong tinatawag na not only the performance but also risk-based design. So it will focus more on the risk to cater more on the commercial side of the establishment and the community as well. So parang nandun na yung risk management saka risk engineering part.
Yeah,
Tama.
we have prescriptive designs, right? You follow all the codes, etc., etc. Local, national, etc.
Mm.
We follow that one. That's it. And then we have the performance design. This is now, about firefighting. Alam niyo ba na meron tayong mga structures na dinesign dito na napakaganda. Pero pagdating sa fire engineering, seklog.
Baksak.
Hindi
And
Ano?
there's another hazard, no? Fire hazard. So lahat dapat integrated.
Architect and engineer, I'm not talking about a fire hazard.
Ay, ano ba, sir?
I'm talking about a non-combustible structure that actually burned.
Okay.
So bakit nangyayari yung ganun? Nagkaroon ng risk engineering doon? Sa palagay ko kulang.
Right.
Nakakalimutan na nandito pala may sa may tabi-tabi. But anyway, joking aside, really, kapag ang World Bank nagbigay ng pera para pautang sa inyo, sa atin, naghahanap sila ng risk management. Ang problem doon, ng risk management na binibigay naman sa kanila, patungkol lamang sa finance. Lahat ng yan, pagka nag-iba yung ginawa mo, saan napunta yung finance mo? Zero, di ba? So, nalugi na tayo, may utang pa tayo. Kaya
Negative pa.
galit na bata pa raw yung mga anak natin, may utang na. Tayo kasalanan noon. Ang tatalino natin, pero hindi natin ginamit, nilagay sa tamang paraan yung ating talino. Maybe this is the time. I mean, this kind of platform that you have, this is really very welcome. That's why when I saw this, I was, wow, maganda to.
Yes, and ang maganda talaga dun, engineer, is lahat ngayon na-i-inform na talagang kailangan ng risk management in all designs. Planning stage pa lang to, guys. Hindi namin sinasabi pag built na. Ang sinasabi namin during the conceptual pa lang planning, ipasok nyo yung risk management in natin because tama kayo you can design the nicest, the sturdiest, the most resilient structure, but if you put it in a location wherein tatangayin yan, babahain yan, malakas ang hangin, baliwala yung pwedeng natin maging award-winning structure. So, may question now, sir, is meron pa bang natitirang lugar sa Pilipinas na mukhang safe para sa mga relocation na to? Kasi we're talking about hindi dapat dito, dapat sa lugar na ganito. Ngayon, ako, bilang kahit hindi ako arkitekto, bilang normal na tao, ang tanong ko, meron pa bang ganitong lugar dito sa Pilipinas? At kung meron,
Can I answer that?
Go ahead.
Ayan. Ang Palawan po ay located on the Sunda Plate. Okay? That's different from the Philippine Plate. So siya yung nag-iisang province in the Philippines na hindi masyado in-earthquake. Okay? And but still, of course, that's susceptible to tsunamis, okay? Pag nagka-earthquake sa neighboring provinces. But anyway, in terms of earthquake, yan po ang pinaka-safe na province in the Philippines. Primarily because of its location. Again, it's on an entirely different plate from the rest of the country. But now, okay, asan ako? Palawan. Okay.
Dito sa Metro Manila, architect, or somewhere in Luzon, or anywhere mas urban area.
Ayan.
Is there still more,
The thing is, it's not entirely prohibited to develop areas where hazards are present. Pwede naman po yan. Dito nga po papasok yung Engineering, Geological, and Geohazard Assessment Report. Dahil nga napaka-prone ng almost all of the areas in the Philippines to all these types of hazards, inaalaw naman po yan. But of course, through this EGAR, okay, we are to intervene, okay, or to provide intervening measures to increase the level of resilience of our proposed development. So okay naman yan. For example, in Baguio, kung titingnan mo ang geohazards map ni Baguio, parang nakapula lahat. Wala ka nang makita na hindi nakapula kasi Baguio is a geologically hazardous area to begin with. Okay? Pero inaalaw naman yan so long as you take into consideration all these regulations and so on and so forth. Okay? But of course, again, kailangan nating i-revise regularly, i-update rather regularly ang ating mga regulations to conform to the changing climate, no. Another thing, gusto ko lang isingit kanina, ang ganda ng discussion sa container van. Sorry, I was able to digress yata the train of thought. Pero balikan ko lang yung yung discussion natin sa container vans. I'm okay in having them proliferated, no, in the country, so long as number one, okay, they comply with our codes, with our regulations, and number two, they are on a safe area. Okay, we've been talking about that one kanina pa. And number three, economical. I have this sense na mahal siya, primarily because most of our professionals and construction workers have limited knowledge. Okay, and then number four, kailangan green siya. Okay, kapag green, ang ibig sabihin niya na less harmful to the environment. Bakit kailangan green? Let's say, ito yung measure natin, no? Ito yung solution natin, proposed solution rather, to our approaches on sustainability. Okay, para mabawasan, to create resilient homes for the Filipino communities. Okay, kasi increasing intensities na yung typhoons natin, okay? May disaster, may earthquake, blah blah blah, and so on and so forth. Pero unknowingly, baka naman ma-exacerbate natin ang climate change. How? Okay? For example, okay, dahil lumalakas ang mga bagyo. All right? Nagko-construct tayo ng breakwaters. Tinataasan natin yung riverbanks, no? Yung breakwater, yung riverbanks made out of concrete, okay, and so on and so forth. Bottom line, paggamit ng concrete yung issue. Okay, those are intervening measures para maprotektahan natin ang ating mga sarili sa increasing intensities ng ating mga hazards. Okay? But unknowingly, ina-exacerbate din po natin ang climate change. Concrete is one of the primary contributors of greenhouse gases.
Yes.
The use of concrete. So it goes back to square one. So dapat green ang measures natin. So in the context of the container vans, paano mo yun papalamigin? How are they going to be air conditioned? Madaming insulation materials, of course, in bigger developments, no, making use of the container vans, gagamit ka talaga ng AC. I think that's inevitable. ACs contribute to greenhouse gases. So again, that brings us back to square one. It exacerbates the climate change. So, again, yun lang po ang 4 points ko. Maski anong intervening measures pa yan, kailangan green, kailangan conducted siya, making use of the participatory approach, kailangan compliant sa codes. We have excellent codes, but some of them have to be updated or revised, and they are on a safe area, container vans na yan, kung yan ang gagamitin mo, and they're economical, para affordable naman ng mga tao. Yun lang.
Agree. Ang hihilig pa man din natin sa konkreto, no? I mean,
Yes.
we're the place for concrete. Lahat gusto concrete, and tama. It's good that you raised that architect.
Everything is interrelated kasi. Dapat hindi lang tayo magpo-provide ng solutions, no, na with this type of minds, with a certain type of mindset. Dapat integrate natin yung systems thinking lens, no? How this one affects the other, how that other entity affects you, and so on and so forth.
Okay, now I'm going to yes, Engineer Ega, go ahead. You want to add up to that?
Yeah, that's why this engineering also involves not only the engineering and financial side.
Yes.
It also involves sociology. You know,
Tama.
we do human factors. You know, if you're familiar with the shell concept, so we do that. Yung the integration of people with people, etc., in the environment, and then we put them all together. That's the risk engineering. Very quickly, is there a place in the Philippines which is not risk prone? Merong mga places tayo na hindi binabaha pero nililindol, mataas.
So mamimili na lang tayo.
I can
Pick your prison.
I can show you an actual real-time hazard map showing that the Philippines, in terms of in terms of earthquake is always in the red zone. Meaning, yung mga tinatawag nating 6, 7, or 8. No, meron tayo doon. Ang problema pa natin doon, hindi natin alam kung nasaan ang location ng mga faults. Right? So, meron
Right.
places na hindi binabagyo. I mean, yung Palawan, hindi naman hindi sa binabagyo, I'm sorry, in terms of earthquake. Magtataka ka nga, ang Palawan ba part ng Philippines?
Technically, hindi, sir.
Right. In terms of the tectonic origin, yes. So, meron mga places na hindi binabaha, pero binabagyo.
Yes.
Tapos merong earthquake. I mean, the bottom line here is, the top level hazards that we have in terms of the country itself is natural hazard. And what is that? Typhoon is number one, because one typhoon can envelope the entire Philippines. Right? The second one, which is more or less localized, would be earthquake. But earthquake can be so devastating, it can destroy a whole community. I mean, look at Baguio, right? So next would be flooding. Yan, mga localized yan. Ang problema lang natin sa flooding ngayon is localized nga, pero pagka tinamaan tayo, when we are hit with an undoy-like rainfall or yung volume, tapos nanggaling pa dun sa mga, which is supposedly, the eastern side was supposedly, our blockade for typhoons. Ang problema doon, na-block na nga, pero yung amount of water na coming in, wala nang pumipigil sa kanya.
Yun.
Putik, nag-landslide na lahat yung lugar. Kaya
Tama.
hirap na hirap sila. Nawala na yung tubig, pero yung putik nandun pa. So, anong klaseng solution na natin? Nandito na tayo eh. Is there a solution there? I'm the one. I'm one who actually believes that there are still solutions that are not only engineering, financial, but again, more on the people, more on touching about the people themselves. I mean, yung implementation, ang dami nga natin batas eh. Ang gaganda, pagka inisip ko yung ganda, hindi nasunod. Sa fire engineering natin, saan tayo kumukuha? Sa Amerika.
Yes.
Ang ganda ng fire engineering. Ba't hindi nasusunod? So, there has to be a point in time na lahat tayo na-realize na natin, especially sa engineering field, because we play a major role here. I mean, in terms of urbanization, in terms of development, engineering plays an important part. Now, tama yung sinabi ninyo, no? Basic study, 8 to 10% of the greenhouse gas is produced by the cement industry. Kaya yung tinatawag na concrete jungle, totoo talaga. So 8 to 10%.
And I think kaya talagang ginagamit kasi rin dito yung concrete. Hindi mo rin masisi kasi yun nga typhoons, malakas ang
right.
strong wind, kailangan nilang matibay na structure. Kailangan mo ng matibay, you go for concrete. Kapag gumamit ka naman ng let's say wood or bamboo or any other materials, isipin nila liliparin yung bahay. So everything really is interconnected. So para tayong walang takas eh. Kaya the reason why the professionals are here, which is in this industry, is we need to be creative. Kung paano ba we do this design, we solve one problem, but then another problem happens. So that's why we put a lot of thought into it, and it really is a collaboration between architects, contractors, engineers. Everybody is involved here. And I think the reason why we're doing this also is we're creating awareness even to the client's perspective. Kasi minsan may mga kliyente na gusto ko to. Siyempre, they very rely on the consultants. Tayo naman, parang, okay, we say this, but if the clients are also aware na, hindi, teka, parang, alam ko bawal yung ganito, or alam ko, di ba, nagkakaroon ng palitan ngayon ng knowledge. That's why we are doing this platform also for that. So, I have another question here. Does embankments on riverside provide a false sense of security to people? Do embankments reduce perceived flood risk? Anybody can answer.
I'll answer that.
Engineer Ekre.
Okay. Embankment, ibig sabihin, you make the side stronger.
Yes.
Ang problem doon is how high is high and how low is low. How strong is strong and how weak is weak. You can build all this. I mean, the structural engineers know exactly how to build these ones. In hydraulic engineering, we know that 45 degrees side would be the most efficient way of having a good flow. I mean, we know that. Pero anong ginagamit? Gabions? Gabions are not bad. But are they supposed to be designed on a stream flow? Noon, parang pumapayag ako noon kasi parang okay naman. Pero actually,
Pwede naman.
Pero ang problema doon, hanggang pwede na lang ba tayo?
Yun na nga.
Right.
Marami tayo. We have environmental engineers, lahat ng klase ng engineers, meron tayong mga experts. Diba? Pero hindi lang, yung nga lang, nakalimutan na meron palang mga risk engineers na katulad namin.
Yes.
This is where we actually, we call ourselves, we are the key. We are ang tawag doon yung the cog on the wheel. Pagka tinanggal mo yan, ang ganda ng design mo, pero wala yung cog, tanggal yan.
Magka-collapse. Yes.
The cog is a small one. The cog is a small one, but it is an important one. When you design big dams, merong cog lagi na design yun, yung mga sa ilalim para hindi dumulas, hindi bumag. Diba? By the way, bigla ko lang naalala, yung word na resilience, pinupoliticize na ngayon yan eh.
Yes. Marami ng negative implications nga eh.
Yung mga posers na mukhang matalino daw, na sinasabi yung pangit daw gamitin yung word na resilience. Di ba, ladies and gentlemen, wala sila yun. Hindi ko na. Pero isang word, pa.
Yun nga eh.
But anyway, we are already here. We are in a very risky, environment. The Philippines is exposed to a lot of natural perils. The highest is typhoon. What should we do? Ang dami na, nabago na nga yung ilang beses nabago na nga yung natin, yung structural code in terms of wind and earthquake. Pero makikita mo pa when a structure fails, you actually see hindi sinunod yung yung mga changes eh. Kung nag-earthquake, tumalon yung isang tulay, hindi sinunod yung sinabi nung nung pagkatapos nung nakaraang code revision, hindi sinunod eh. So, tao problema. I mean, the designers nandyan lahat. And then the implementation becomes the problem.
Implementation talaga.
It's not good. Well, at least for our job, we are called there to actually explain to them that ginawa mo kasi. Pero siya namin sinasabi yung mga colleagues din naman yun. Minsan yung nag-implement eh. Ang husay ng design pero yung workmanship.
Right, isa pa yun.
So,
kasi kapag kunwari, papatayo tayo ng building or ng bridge or any structure, hindi naman kasi yan papasa kung hindi natin susundan yung code eh, di ba? Hindi a-approve yan, but it's in the actual construction stage na parang ano bang nangyayari nga. Kasi in terms of design, confident naman tayo dyan eh. Especially the structural engineers. I mean, if kapag maglalabas ka talaga ng budget mo at ng cost, wag nyong i-sacrifice ang structural ng kahit anong building. Kasi yan talaga ang magiging core foundation ninyo. Tama ba ako, Engineer Earl?
Yes, agree.
Kayo talaga eh. Yes, Engineer Egay.
Sa abroad, na medyo nakikinabang na rin tayo, pagka meron isang malaking project, these proponents call the services of risk engineering because they want to know what the risks are in terms of that project. So dito kami nagkukumahog kami. We have all the natural hazards, we have the analysis, the financial analysis, etc. Kasi pagka nag-fail yung project na yon, hindi lang naman yung project mismo nag-fail.
Right.
Financial side. Magagawa naman yan eh. Pero paano yung business interruption nun?
Yes.
Hindi mo natigil yung operation just because of a simple thing na hindi pa nasunod. Doon sa risk analysis, meron yun. May mga may mga mathematical computations, we have models. We can show where the actual we can actually simulate where the possible hit of an earthquake can happen. We do the mathematical. Eksakto ba 'yon? Well, it becomes exact because it's mathematics, pero is it 0-0? Pagdating doon, hindi naman. Kasi ang earthquake naman is napakalaki, di ba? So we can actually do the models and then tell them, itong area na to has the probability of being hit by a magnitude 7 or 8.
Yes.
What did you design? Alam niyo ba, merong mga structures na lumapit sa akin na this was designed for a magnitude 8. Magnitude 4 lang nag-fail. Pag tinignan mo, bakit ba yung design? Hindi naman pangit yung design. Ang ganda nga eh. Bakit nag-fail? Kasi there were added appurtenances, added structures na hindi na consider yung design. So yung structure na yun yung nag-fail. Nahawa lang yung iba. So if risk engineering were already involved there, nakita na kagad namin yan. Tama ba ito? Ano ba ito? Paano mo ba didesign ito? There was an argument that risk engineering may affect the schedule of the planning stages. I mean, the answer is easy. Then you plan for risk engineering in the planning stages para yung time frame na ilalagay. Ang problem lang doon is we become an add-on. Pag may problema, itawagin mo.
Doon na kayo pagkatapos.
Okay naman yung kaya lang pagdating sa national level, para iniisip mo, ba't mo ganun? Sayang naman yun.
Pero dapat talaga ma-involve kayo, sir, kasi ang nangyayari is all eyes talaga will go to the engineers and the architects. Parang ano bang pagkakamali na ginawa ninyo? Na parang on our side, dinesign naman namin ng maayos. We follow the computations. But then yun nga there is a lack of a certain ingredient to it, which is the risk management engineering part nga that can help plan everything. And then just to take off from that, no, sir, yung we're doing international, pwede naman, like we follow all the other protocols. There's a question here. How possible is it to apply the disaster mitigation strategies from other countries, including the Japan's underground discharge channel or Australia's self-closing flood barrier and other flood control approaches in the risk-prone cities here in the country? So in short, pwede ba natin ito ma-apply dito? Engineer Agay.
Okay.
Sure. Pera, no? Assuming na meron tayong pera.
Oh, assuming.
Meron magpifinance. Bakit hindi? Number one, Kuala Lumpur is a flood-prone area. Bakit nakapag-build sila doon ng mga multi-level na tunnel na pagkabaha, pwede na lang i-divert lahat ng baha papunta doon sa tunnel. So, hindi madadaanan. Pero diverted doon. Now, these are massive projects. Punta tayo local. Alam niyo ba yung BGC, meron silang underground reservoir? Alam niyo yun? Alam niyo yun?
Yeah.
So, well, the area of BGC, hindi naman flood prone. Pero forward thinking, alam nila kung how to harvest this water na napakadami. Sa India, na ang tubig doon talagang mahal, di ba? Hindi sila masyadong doon, katulad natin. Meron silang project na ang tawag nila is harvesting. So, there is now a law, yung sa green the green law. Meron silang law na kada structure na yung nagagawin mo, kay bahay ka man o whatever you are, you have to provide a rainfall harvesting facility. So, from a small harvesting facility to a big harvesting facility, which is now modeled by the BGC facility, hindi ba pwedeng gamitin yun? Now, from the big tunnel, which is actually usable, double, 2 layers ng traffic, that becomes an big underground canal that diverts that diverts the flood in that part of Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur. Hindi pa pwedeng gawin nyo dito sa atin. Pwede. Yung mga argument nila noon na hindi pwede yung subway, luma na yun eh. I mean, panahon pa siguro ng lolo ko.
Argument na yun. Issue na yun.
Kasi nga,
wala lang kasing gumagalaw. Oo, walang implementation.
Pero nagpatunay na pwede. So, pwede ba natin i-adapt yung dito? Di ba, I mean, nung ganun pa ako kalaki, meron nagsabi na yung sa Espanya, baka magkaroon daw ng ng subway. Ang sabi nila, hindi pwede kasi madali lagi, I mean, alam mo naman pagka
dagat kami lagi doon eh. Oo, swimming kami lagi doon.
Nahihirapan nga kami magdaan doon, di ba? So, I mean, there are solutions. And most of these solutions are engineering. However, every solution will not necessarily solve the entire risk situation because every solution might introduce another form of risk. That's why risk engineering should be an integral part of all these kinds of solutions. Kasi para hindi mo naman masasabi, hindi maganda yung structural engineer nito, yung architect nito, sama na hindi mo pwede pagka sila lagi nasisisi, di ba? So pagka may nasunog na sinasabi electrical failure, wala namang because for electrical engineers eh. Tapos bumagsak. Ba't bumagsak yan?
Structural yan.
Structural naman yan ah.
Ganun lagi. May crack, structural. May uga yung bahay, structural. Pag nasira yung paint, arkitekto. So ganun talaga napupunta. And siguro to take from that, sir, if ang kailangan lang natin is kunwari financial help, no? I think if we get financial help from whoever investors, kasi lumalabas ngayon, yung mga help na yan, pumupunta lang sa relief ops rin. You know, just for band-aid solutions, wherein sana we're investing this money for future use na. Which is yun nga, kung mahal man gumawa ng tunnel, kung wari for a reservoir, gawin na natin ngayon because the implications of that in the future will be greater. Then hindi kailangan maglagay ng funding for greater relief ops. Diba? That could be one way of saying that also. And here's another question.
Sir, can I add something to
yes,
that?
Architect. Yes.
For me, there is nothing wrong in adopting international strategies to the local setting. Just don't forget to contextualize it to the local setting and that they do not open up new problems. Okay? Kailangan contextualize. Mag-integrate ka ng tunnels. Okay? For example, dapat nasa safe area. Okay? We are an earthquake-prone country. Okay? Maglalagay ka nga dyan, baka bigla namang gumalaw yung lupa and so on and so forth. So kailangan at all times, at all costs ng contextualization at ng systems thinking, ano ang effect niyan, baka mag-open up pa yan ng iba pang problema. Thank you.
Right. Engineer Earl, you have something to add to the question?
Yeah, I think both of my colleagues here already discussed most of the items to address those cases.
Okay, so the other question now is, my urban planning professor in college floated the idea that we should make use of the eastern side of Luzon and Metro Manila because currently all waterways flow through Manila Bay and Laguna de Bay. Can this be explored as one of the mid to long-term solution?
Back in the 1980s, we already have a master plan. Inumpisahan na namin yan. We have a master plan for water supply. Kaliwa kanan rito, luma na yun eh. I-develop na dam, pero hindi natuloy.
Bakit siya hindi natuloy, sir?
Politika.
Okay. Mahirap pag yan yung kalaban eh.
Tapos may namatay. Tinanggal lahat ng financing sa Pilipinas. Hindi wala tayong pera. Yan ang gusto ng mga tao. Di ba? Yan ang gusto nila kung tayo, nagdi-develop na, guluhin. Ang ganda na. Hindi, nagkaroon tayo ng isang gobyerno na meron na sanang maganda, di ba? and then may pumasok na presidente, hindi niya ginamit. Sayang yung
Continuation. That's, I think that's one rin eh. Continuation ng project, di ba?
In a small scale, pwede mo namang gawin yung solution. Tapos, palaki ng palaki. Of course, decontextualization in terms of the risks involved na i-integrate mo doon sa design. Nandun yun. That's given. Diba? So, ang problema mo doon is pagka naging massive na yung project, ito na kamo, biglang merong mangongontra na local or national level.
Mm-hmm.
So, as people who are actually affected, what can we do?
Mm-hmm.
Who actually provides the financing in this project? Mostly the private sector.
Yes.
Maganda, nakakapagdikta ang private sector. Alam niyo ba yung skyway na yan? Dahil sa kaguluhan na yan, sabi ng mga antena, hindi naman natin idaan sa di wala pang naging problema ngayon. Well, naidaan. So, nagawa yung project. Ang ganda. So, I don't know. We have a master plan. The master plan is nice. Tama ka, dalawa lang naman ang pwede namang pagdepositohan na pinanggagalingan din ng mga di ba? Either on the western side would be the Manila Bay or on the eastern side would be the Laguna de Bay. Ang problem doon sa eastern side, yun nga sana yung pananggalang natin eh. Kaso nga hindi na protected yung ating boundary.
Mm-hmm.
No, meron pa bang solution doon? Engineering solution na lang talaga matitira. Natural solution, planting, pwede rin naman. But
it will take long. It will take long.
It's a long solution. Long and arduous solution. Sigurado maraming mamamatay doon dahil maraming ayaw na baguhin nila at gandahan uli yung bundok doon. Ang magagawa natin, di siyempre labanan yung mga taong mga ganun. So engineering solution meron. But do we have the will? Do we have the political will to actually apply these things? Sa mga papel, kukuha ng funding sa World Bank, sa Japan, sa Europe. Sa papel, ang ganda ng design. Ang ganda. Pinag-aralan talaga. Siguro mga 5,000 pages. Pag binasa mo, pinaghiwa-hiwalay, ang ganda naman ito. Pwede ito sa atin. We have to start small. Kaya yung model ng BGC na yan, yung reservoir na yan, alam mo, dapat iniisip na ng mga gobernador. Mga senador mga ano lang naman yan. Mga gobernador nag-iisip niyan pagkatapos yung mga mayor, doon sa mga barangay mo, umpisa mo doon.
Local, yes.
Local lagi, yes.
Muna.
Bottom up.
Diba? Ganun muna dahil mayor kami po yung naapektuhan eh. Ano ba balak ko? Si mayor nagkakamot na ganun kasi meron akong minahan eh. Kaya abutan pati yung minahan ko doon. Kaya tayo mga tao, tayo ang merong control. Tayo mismo, yung tayo naglalagay dyan, whoever we put there, deserve natin yun kasi tayo naglagay.
Yan dapat ang nagpoprotekta sa atin eh. Yan talaga eh.
So we have to start small. Diba yung in the level of community, yung training natin sa mga community, sa mga pamilya natin, palaki.
Mm-hmm.
Meron na tayo mga models available na pwede na natin kopyahin.
Right. And to answer that question, sir, ibig sabihin, kaya naman talaga. It's just that hindi ginawa or hindi pa rin siya ginagawa hanggang ngayon. So yun ang answer. Anybody would like to add to that?
Ako, dahil dati pa siyang plano, it has to be revisited thoroughly kasi baka hindi na siya akma to the current setting. Ang bilis magbago ng panahon here in the Philippines and in the world. Thank you.
Tama. Engineer Earl, you have something to add to that?
Yes, again, it's more of, these are good platform for awareness and then for siguro proper updates and some more push on the implementation side kasi if some of those regulations are present, so implementing it well might make a difference dun sa gusto nating maabot.
Tama. And I think nga, with this discussion, I'm sure may mga tao dyan na hindi nila alam that BGC actually has a water reservoir. Not everybody knows that naman eh. Like, ano bang pakialam nila sa ilalim, diba? But dito sa industriya natin, alam natin that there is something below that catches their water. And I think this is a good platform para alam nila that plans like that are actually happening. You know, it's being implemented and it is possible. It is, kailangan mo lang talaga i-push. And sad to say, you know, even if your designers or your engineers are very well versed or informed, kailangan talaga namin kasi yung suporta ng gobyerno. 'Di ba? Ano yan eh, walang mangyayari sa, how many times did we design something that ended there because it wasn't backed up by the government, which is kailangan na kailangan yan. And you know, this is good kasi nasasagot yung ibang questions. And there's one more. What are the current issues we should concentrate on in flood risk management? Siguro nakita natin kung gaano nasalanta yung Cagayan, Tuguegarao, you know, even Marikina, Rizal with the flood. Paano ba? Just before we end this segment, no, how do we address that flooding sa mga bahay, or how do they prevent yung mga bahay nila ngayon na existing? Anybody can answer that. Alam mo, parang tatanggapin na natin na binabaha sila. Pero paano ba nila mapoprotektahan na yung bahay nila pwede pa nilang balikan? Structural sound pa rin sila kahit anigin ng tubig. Go ahead, Engineer Egay.
Structural soundness ng mga bahay na malapit doon sa flood-prone area becomes a big question because of the uplift pressures. Now, yung mga yon, ano magagawa natin doon? So isa-isa, we will do a geophysical study again of the facilities. Kasi we cannot underestimate the power of water.
Mm-hmm.
Yung uplift pressure pa lang na yan, kaya niyang itumba ang isang dam.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So, and now we are talking about of small communities right there on the flood plains that is always flooded. Kaya sabi ng iba, ngayon lang kami na bumuho ito eh. Lagi naman kami pina-flood noon eh. Pero ngayon bumuho kaya grabe po itong flooding na to. Pero actually, pag tinignan mo naman yung technical the data, rainfall data, mas malakas pa yung data mas malakas pa yung rainfall ng mga nakaraan sa ngayon eh. So ito, kasi nga humina na yun. O bakit pa? Yung mga drainage system natin napuno ng buhangin. Instead na 1 meter, dahil sa dami ng buhangin na natira is 6 inches. Kaya, konting ulan lang po sa amin ngayon, dali na akong magbaha eh. Again, babalik na naman tayo doon sa basura. Saan ba tinapong basura mo din?
Tama.
Diba? So,
babalik tayo sa tao na naman kasi nagsimula. Yun ang it always goes back to that eh. Sa tao talaga. Nasa atin ng control.
Management. Hindi sana masyado mahirap ang solusyon yan eh. Kaya lang nandito situation na these areas we have to accept are really flood prone. Anong solution doon? Paalisin natin yung mga tao, i-relocate, saan mo i-relocate? So, this is close to impossible, no? May mga communities na pwede kang i-relocate. Pwede naman yun. Pwede naman. Other solutions, no? Now, we really have to rock our brains. And then we have to, balik rin natin yung hazard map natin. I mean, Project NOAA is there. They have already defined where the flood-prone areas are. Tukin pa ba sa ating sarili natin, intindihin natin, flood-prone ba yan? Ang tanong, saang area ba yung binabaha? Yan ang tanong noon eh. Hindi ako bibili ng property doon. Ang tanong ngayon, saan bang area yung hindi binabaha? Pag nagtanong ka pa, parang malungkot ka pa kasi alam mo, dito babahain eh. Diba?
Engineer Egay, I really want to touch up to that. Sorry, bago ko pa makalimutan to. No? May isa kasing nagtanong rin on Facebook regarding Project NOAA. And I'm sure everybody is well-versed on this also. How relevant is Project NOAA in terms of assessing the risks related to our to your geography? Should it not be a standard reference for our builders?
Oh, I'm sure. They're already using that. How relevant? It is very relevant. Kaya lang, it's Johnny come lately. But anyway, nandiyan naman yan. Pero sabi ko, hindi lang alam ng ating industry na nung wala pang Project NOAA, meron na kaming ginagamit na tinatawag naming catastrophic network. Kaya kung in-integrate na sana yung mga risk engineering diyan, na-define na noong pang araw. Kung saan yung napakaraming bagyo, kung saan yung napakalakas ng mga earthquake, at saka kung saan yung mga posibilidad na flood. Ang laging katapat ng flood at saka ng earthquake ay yung mga landslide. Pero mga areas na nagla-landslide kahit na walang earthquake, kahit na walang flooding because of the geotechnical condition. Defined na yun, wala pa yung Project NOAA. Mabuti na nga lang, dumating nga sila Dr. Solidum, yung mga expert natin, i-develop na natin ito. So Project NOAA is very useful.
Relevant and relevant also. Yes.
May dagdag lang ako doon, sorry. I agree dun sa sinabi ni Engineer Egay, no. Project NOAA is very relevant and important, especially to our profession, engineering and architecture. But I think sa kabilang side ng coin, may isa pang importanteng aspect no na kailangan tingnan. Itong mga data no ng very productive endeavor na ito dapat maibaba natin down to the ground sa mga tao. Kailangan ma-digest nila yung data, and we as architects and engineers no as practitioners in the profession shall be serving as that mediator no, yung bridge ng data ng endeavors ng government. Kailangan ma-translate natin sila into something that can be easily interpreted by the public. I think that's one aspect that we lack on in the general sense no, of the word here in the Philippines. Tayo lang yung may alam. And of course, some clients na nakapag-aral for example o naiintindihan tayo, may background to some extent ng ating profession, pero mas marami pa rin sa ano natin sa population natin ang hirap umintindi sa mga data na to that's very scientific in nature. So we should be serving as that bridge for the Filipinos.
Yes. Engineer Earl, anything to add to that?
Yeah, for me to have a holistic approach or risk assessment on this case. So I think it's now time to integrate risk management, risk analysis into this different structures that we have, not only on buildings, but other infrastructures like dams and dikes or roads or bridges, for example, because it entails the holistic view of the risk, not only particularly on buildings alone, but as a whole, the community itself and the surrounding environment, which affects the safety and integrity of a particular building. So it's more of a holistic integration by way of, I'm not sure, mandating for this or to make it mandatory for this risk management or risk engineering to be part not only in the community or any new structure that to be built in the future.
I agree. And, with everything that we have discussed, there are three important words here: implementation, integration, and really collaboration with everyone in the industry, not just the construction industry, but also, with the local government itself. And everyone, we are here. The designers are here, the consultants are here, the experts are here. It's just really a matter of implementing all these designs that we do to help protect talaga our country na talagang tanatanggap na talaga natin na we're prone to all these disasters. And this conversation has been very informative. Now, let's just pause for a short break, and then later on, I will get your final statements because I don't want to keep you long na already, but ang daming natutuwa dito sa topic natin and marami silang natututunan. So, mga parts, please stay with us. Bold Talks will be right back.
Panasonic. Panasonic. Panasonic.
Thank you very much to Panasonic for co-presenting Bold Talks. So welcome back mga parts, and we are still on our topic about disaster risk management. Of course, we have here Engineer Egay, Engineer Earl, and Architect Levy. So thank you. That was a really good discussion, no? But for your information also to our gentlemen here, we would like to call the attention of everyone so that you can help vulnerable families rise from the impact of typhoons Rolly and Ulysses. Habitat for Humanity Philippines is working with the local NGOs to provide assistance to disaster-affected families in the hardest hit communities. So kindly visit habitat.org.ph/donate now. They are doing their part in donating. Ang dami nating nakita niyo naman, it's all over the news. All these communities badly hit by the typhoons, and this is just one way of curve to help for this donation drive. Now, I also know that I think Architect Levy, your UAP Fort Bonifacio chapter, is also doing a donation drive. Kindly invite everyone and discuss.
Thank you, Architect Patch. So the United Architects of the Philippines Fort Bonifacio Taguig chapter is calling for donations for the affected families of the Typhoon Ulysses and Rolly. Okay, so the drop-off location is the Jollibee branch in the Bonifacio stopover. That's beside Sugar Bee, if I'm not mistaken. That's along 31st Street. So it's available on November 21 and 22, Saturday and Sunday. Saturday from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. and Sunday that's from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. We're accepting non-food items and food items as well. And please visit our Facebook page, that's United Architects of the Philippines Fort Bonifacio Taguig chapter, for more information. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Architect Levy. That's November 22 and 23. Am I right?
Sorry, 21 and 22.
21
Saturday
and
and
22.
Sunday.
Okay, it's the weekend, so you guys can just drop off your goods. They can be in kind or cash also, para lang makatulong tayo sa mga victims. And Engineer Egay, I know you are working on a book right now. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about it? Patapos na ba to? And later on, how can we get a hold of this book that will really help us be informed about everything that's happening?
It's still a work in progress. I was hoping to finish it this year, but because of what happened to us, no, the pandemic. The pandemic is actually it's always been a part of the risk assessment of
Mm.
almost all risk managers in the world. But the problem was not much was being said about that. So that made me a little bit embarrassed because it's part of the book. But now we will have more about that. Um, I hope to finish it this year. No, pero December na.
May 1 month pa ba, sir?
Kaya, sir.
Already have a working draft of that. But in terms of the work that I've been doing, most part of the book is already been applied and implemented in many of the clientels that I had. That also includes some form of forensic engineering also in that part, and then the business continuity part. So yeah, I'm working hard on that, and hopefully we'll be, I'm targeting making it accessible to even the non-technical side of the community.
Yes.
So yeah, I do maybe sometimes I do speaking engagement in schools para lang ma-promote itong risk management na alam naman ng maraming tao kung ano yun. So
Right.
yes, thank you for asking about that.
We're looking forward to that, Engineer Egay. And I mean, this platform, this show right now, has helped a lot of people open their minds and be informed that there is risk management engineering, and things like this can be prevented. Now, it's been a very it's a long and interesting discussion. We've been here for 2 hours, so thank you very much for being here. Now, I would like to ask for your final statements. May it be an advice or just inform people regarding your specializations on how we can, still prevent these things from happening and hindi naman mawala ng pag-asa yung mga tao. In terms of our profession, nandito tayo para tumulong. So let's start with Engineer Earl. Engineer Earl, I know you're a structural engineer. Paano nyo maya-address to sa mga tao, may it be in our industry or anybody who can understand what's happening now?
Yes. Well, to give a new outlook on how to face risk as a holistic part of dealing with it. So we should be aware of the risks, not only for the typhoon or for the earthquake per se, but the bigger part of risk, I mean, the holistic approach in it, not only for a particular building, but the surrounding buildings, and on how to integrate risk management into these areas that are prone to risk, and then to have a good implementation, or shall I say, yung kaya na sinabi ko, to have a push on implementation side para yung awareness at saka integration magkaroon siya ng fruitful effect in the future. So parang may tiered step lang to reach the goal that we are looking for. So I think that's it for...
Thank you very much, Engineer Earl. What about you, Architect Levy?
Okay, so again, thank you so much for having me here. Dami ko natutunan kay Engineer Egay and kay Engineer Earl. It's my pleasure as well to be here. Last words, siguro consult the right professionals. Do not compromise your safety and your loved ones' safety as well. Okay, and then the UN defined resilience as the ability of a system, community, or society exposed to hazards to resist, absorb, accommodate, adapt to, transform, and recover from the effects of a hazard in a timely and efficient manner, including through the preservation and restoration of its essential basic structures and functions through risk management. Let us be resilient Filipinos in the holistic sense of the word. Thank you.
Very well said, Architect Levy. And Engineer Egay, your final advice, or
Risk engineering is the soul of risk management. Without risk engineering, you don't have a risk management. You only have a plan. So, I mean, architecture defines the kind of structure that melds and provides comfort, safety, and security to people. Sustainability, yung kagandahan niya, the importance, cultural, etc. Yes, architects may provide close to impossible shapes, but we have structural engineers to actually provide the the, the structure itself that makes it safe for a particular duty or a
Mhm.
particular tsaka yung lifetime. Risk engineering is a cog. We are a key. We are the ones who actually we are so small that sometimes we are transparent to everyone.
Mhm.
Good or bad. Sometimes it's good para you know give more importance to these two uh, great great professions. But risk engineering has to be there because we will make sense of all this and we meld them together so that the structure of risk management will actually be there.
Right.
Risk is something that is always there. We are all risk managers, by the way. Hindi lang natin alam pa yon.
Mhm.
Pero ngayon, unti-unti na natin nalalaman.
Mhm.
Thank you very
Mhm.
much for having me in this very interesting platform.
Thank you very much, Engineer Egay. And it's been, I've learned a lot from all three of you. It's a good combination. Tama ka, the structure, the engineers are the most important also part of everything that is going on now, just to put us in the right direction or just to bring back the fundamentals and the actual execution. Nandito tayong lahat. And of course, the architects are there, all the other characters in the building industry. So salamat. Thank you very much, Engineer Earl Bonita, Architect
Thank
Levi
you.
Canaleta, and Engineer Egay Dapiton. Maraming salamat for sharing your views with us. I mean, we need to put a stop to the cycle of rescue, relief, and rehabilitation, only to wait for the next disaster and wait for more foreign aid. We are extremely grateful for the support we continue to receive, but it should certainly not be a way of life. Let's start educating everyone and building a culture of sustainable construction from the design stage up to the development of our houses and other structures. As professionals assist those in authority, let's all do our part. Curve TV's Bold Talks will be right back.
Panasonic. Panasonic. Panasonic.
I spoke with women who had dark spots and how they solved it.
For so many years, I spent a lot on trying products that didn't lighten my dark spots.
My dark spots came because of hormonal changes during my last pregnancy.
I had dark spots, a skin condition I inherited from my mom. It's called melasma.
Use PinoCare, the clinically proven solution to melasma. Take PinoCare.
Mega, we care.
Curve TV's Bold Talks is co-presented by Panasonic. For more details on sponsorship, please drop us an email at curvetvph@gmail.com. Parts, if you're a freelancer or part of a startup design, contracting, or engineering company, and you want to be featured in our program, please do email us. We also welcome those construction professionals who have artistic talents to showcase. So again, please message us. Thank you for staying with me today. It has been an awesome discussion. This is something that you will look back and review and see how we can help prevent all these calamities sa ating mga communities. So, salamat for staying with us for 2 hours. It's been fun. It's been great. Connect with our socials. Don't forget, at Curve TV PH for more details and updates. We are on Kumu, Facebook, in YouTube and Instagram. Do follow us on all those social media platforms. Again, this has been Bold Talks. Stay safe, everyone. Get an architect, get an engineer, get a risk engineer, get a contractor, and get ahead of the curve. I am Architect Patch, and you're watching Curve TV, your collaborative construction channel.